Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the first in a series of 4 events that we are running with DCMS for place leaders and place makers. My name is Vicky de Blasi. I'm the head of marketing at UK5G, and I'm going to be your host today. We have got a jam-packed agenda for you today in this deep dive into the Testbed and Trials Programme. We're going to be starting off with an introduction from DCMS to the programme as a whole, before looking at 3 project case studies, 1 urban, 1 rural, and 1 focused on health and social care. We'll then be bringing all of our speakers together, along with Sharon from Nottinghamshire County Council, representing the Connected Forest project, for a panel session, and that is the chance for you to ask your questions. As we're going through, if you have any questions for any of the individual speakers or for the group as a whole, please put them in the chat box and we will tackle them when we get to that stage of the agenda. Just a brief introduction to UK5G first, for those of you who are not familiar with us. We are an innovation network that is funded by DCMS, but operates as an impartial entity. And our remit is essentially to accelerate the adoption and deployment of 5G across all 4 nations. We do that in 3 key ways. We support the development of the ecosystem as a whole, and that's looking at both the supply side, so the telecom side, but also the demand side. So part of that is events like this, where we engage with place leaders and makers, with various industry sectors to help them understand what 5G can do and how they can deploy it. We manage information about 5G activities, and specifically the benefits that have been realised and the learnings coming out of 5G initiatives. And we focus on looking at how we can raise the profile of the 5G ecosystem here in the UK on a global stage. We are a membership organisation, so we have just over 5,000 registered users now, coming from over 1,800 organisations. And we have a strong marketing engine, which I suppose I would say, but we have regular newsletters. We have a website which is updated daily with relevant news, articles and resources, and a number of working groups, events and campaigns which are focused at really raising and sharing practices and learnings and information that will be relevant to the broader ecosystem. One of the things that is perhaps most relevant to this audience is at the end of 2021, we launched a new hub on the website called Places. This is designed specifically for local authorities, regional authorities and LEPs. And this is focused very much on the how question. So how do you actually deploy 5G in your area or region? If you look at that section of the site, and you can see the URL at the bottom of your screen there, that enables you to very quickly and easily explore 5G initiatives that have taken place in your region. But perhaps most importantly, it also provides information, practical insights, guides, assets, and some talking head videos, which look at 4 key areas, which, speaking to placemakers, they told us were the key areas that they wanted help or guidance on. How to engage with your local community, infrastructure, coordination, leadership and execution. So once you've figured out what you need to deploy and where, how do you actually make that happen? And fourthly, procurement and partnership. So specifically looking at how to effectively bring together public and private sector. So for those of you who have not yet signed up as members, of course, I'm going to actively encourage you to do so. But that section of the site in particular is really worth a look. We've got lots and lots of information on there. We're adding to it all of the time. And it's really designed in the same essence as this event to share all the learnings and all the work that's been done already, so that you can hear from those who've been there, done that, and hopefully enable you to fast track through your deployments and avoid any of the banana skins that other people might have potentially slipped on already. So without further ado, I will introduce you to Tony Scales from DCMS. Tony, over to you.
And I'm now off mute. Good morning. Thanks, Vicky. Great introduction. I'm afraid my name's misspelt on the slide, but that's
Oh,
probably
I'm
my
sorry, Tony. No, I think that is my fault. Apologies.
fault. It's SCEA for
Yeah.
anybody who needs it, but never mind. No, let's not worry about that. Let's move on to the next slide, please. Okay, so the programme was, the core of it was a fund of £200 million to be invested in this nationally coordinated programme of building 5G test beds and trial facilities. And the key thing here was that, of great relevance to today, was that it was to be across a range of geographic and vertical market segments. And that's because not every 5G is the same 5G wherever you go. 5G is a very configurable, very plastic and complex technology, which covers a lot of different areas. So you have to know which type of deployment you need before you jump in. But the £200 million is an important factor in the life of the programme. Next slide, please, Laura. Okay, so what have we done over the last 4 or 5 years, or 4.5 years? We've built quite a lot of stuff, actually. In fact, there are some trials that were even built before the ones on this map, which were the 3 universities, King's London, Surrey, and Bristol, all built sort of very, very early 5G networks for us, and working with Vodafone and others, produced the first 5G calls in the world, and established the UK as a great place to do research into 5G. You can see there's a wide range of different use case trials on this map, and I think there's over 50 spots on this map now that we've included a whole load of trials from the supply chain diversification programme, as well as the 5G test beds and trials. Next slide, please. All right. So the next sort of look ahead is the wireless infrastructure strategy, which DCMS is working on now. And as it says on the tin here, it's to provide that framework for the future of connectivity for the UK. In particular, obviously it says wireless, so it's about mobile technology more than the fixed world. How do we take advantage of all of that gigabit coverage that we're building at the moment to add not just premises and people, but also mobile networks? Next slide, please, Laura. So the question really for the strategy is, how do we articulate our policy ambitions? How do we collaborate and focus on R&D? How do we make sure there's enough spectrum of the right type around for everybody? And how do we influence the future standards development of beyond 5G, and as 5G becomes ultimately 6G and other things as well? Next slide, please. So we're at the really great part of the programme now, where we're starting to learn the lessons from all of those projects that I showed you earlier. And the key thing to note is that the benefits, the full benefits realisation process has only really taken place on the first 6 projects that we ran, which is now nearly 2 years ago. And there are, so there's a huge amount to add to this slide. But you can see that even those first 6 slides demonstrated significant benefits and understanding and learning about 5G right at the beginning. Those 6 projects had 53 use cases between them and demonstrated 190 benefits. And they're all in that pushing projects, pushing learning solutions and products up the TRL, the technology readiness levels, up into the higher levels that we're after to get them towards deployment. And they all attracted significant private investment, and that's continued to be the case. Next slide, please, Laura. So, as I said before, there were 34 projects in the 5G Testbed and Trials Programme. That programme is now coming to a close at the end of March. It officially comes to an end in terms of its active life of launching new projects and so on. And however, there are extensions for, I think, 10 projects, which will continue some time into the next financial year to complete their use case work, to complete their proofs, and to complete gathering their benefits. and use case studies and so on. But in the process, and actually Vicky's stats are probably more up to date than this. A very large number of people and organisations across many industries and geographies that have experienced 5G through the programme and have learned that 5G has a lot to offer. The programme and its model has been internationally recognised. Next week in Mobile World Congress, quite a few of our projects will be there, showing off their wares, and certainly our policy teams will be there as well. We're also driving conversations with our ministers on and with our government departments. So a lot of conversation and dialogue now with NHS and Department of Health, with transport, with manufacturing and bays, etc. So lots and lots of active cross-government work going on as well. Next slide, please. I think just very quickly, I suppose the lessons learned from the programme so far. Yeah, we're definitely still early stage in 5G's lifetime. These generations always take a while to get really embedded in the national picture. Clear that access to spectrum equipment, particularly equipment, has been very difficult for a lot of our projects, and that's really just because they're very early in the process. As I said earlier, one size of 5G doesn't fit all. What's suitable for a next generation factory of the future is not the same 5G as we'll deploy in rural Dorset. It's really important that we share our stories, and that's what today's session is all about, to get people understanding why they need 5G, how they get it, and how they make a case for deploying it. That wide engagement with local authorities is really important to the place discussion, and the DCIA programme, the Digital Connectivity Infrastructure Acceleration, a bit of a mouthful, has now launched, and the projects are up and running, which are all about engaging local authorities in getting them understanding where their infrastructure is, how they map it, how they make it available to players all around to deploy the infrastructure. And let's not forget, we need the supply chain, the telecom supply chain. Really important that we keep them engaged in what we're doing, wherever we are and wherever we're trying to work. Even if you may not necessarily want to engage directly through an operator, but you'll definitely need equipment and you'll need expertise. And then the last point was, and I think we keep going with that, is start small, build on it, scale up. Don't try necessarily to try and boil the ocean in your first session. Next slide, please. And I think I'm done. How am I doing on time, Laura?
You are dead on
Perfect.
time, Tony. Yeah, perfect. Thank you very much.
Excellent.
It's a great overview. Thank you. So we're going to dive now into looking at some of the projects in a bit more detail. And first up, therefore, I'm very pleased to welcome Mark Stanfield, who is the chair of the West Midlands 5G programme. Mark, over to you.
Thanks, Vicky, and hello, everybody. Hope you're all okay and enjoying the day. So, bit of background. So, my background is telecoms, O2, setting up GIFGAF. But I also chair local enterprise partnership with Worcestershire, and I'm involved with the Midlands Engine at an executive board, but also as well on the chairing the digital board. So basically, I'm a poacher turned gamekeeper. That's what I really am. And I suppose what it is, it's about my passion for driving the whole agenda of digital connectivity. And why do I say that? Well, I think the big message I've got coming out of all this one about, and I know we had it from a Worcestershire, from a West Midlands one, is the things we're talking about here. If anybody are interested in this, they do three things in terms of actually driving not only physical connectivity, which you all know, but digital connectivity. It drives productivity, and it's been shown to drive productivity anywhere between 3 and 5%. That's critical, but it's an enabler to new ways of working. And unless we have some of these things, so it's about encouraging people to get behind in these initiatives and the adoption. and actually driving it so it changes the UK economy and drives our GDP up. That's the second thing. And the third thing is, particularly for some of the regions, because a lot of money goes down to the southeast, it's about actually, I'm not going to use the political terms about levelling up or anything like that. It's about actually enabling you to leapfrog other areas to actually bring in new innovation. So for me, this is critical for the UK economy of what we're doing. From a West Midlands perspective, if we go on to the next slide, we were set up by DCMS. It was a competition, and West Midlands had been, again, in those examples before, had been a little bit left behind. Most of the investment had gone into the southeast, and we need to do something different. And we saw this as an opportunity of actually driving the economy forward and being seen in a different light. So I would encourage everybody to get behind any of their own initiatives now to actually drive these things forward. But we were set up as the biggest of the actual child beds, and it was about, fundamentally, it was about driving at scale a connected program across the communities and bringing some of the test beds and trials together, what we wanted to do. We've been now across the region now, the West Midlands region, and working collaboratively with Midlands Engine, with some of the other regions as well, now for 3 years. And we've also had the 5G Accelerator for over 2 years, and that's about driving the learnings and the adoption, and I'll talk about those in a bit going forward. And we've also had over 40 plus user cases. We're now in a position actually where we're commercializing everything now. So we've seen the value in what we're doing, we'll talk about it. And so we're now actually taking those learnings and actually taking them to other local authorities, to other areas. And Tony talked about mapping. It's that mapping capability. You've got to know where you start from if you want to move forward. It's about some of the learnings around the transport, the health, the manufacturing ones, about how do you actually drive that through the manufacturing and all the other sectors that I've just mentioned as well. So we're looking to take it, because if they just die, we lose all the knowledge. So it's about how do we actually take these things forward. So that's a big message that if anybody wants to actually go to. On the next slide, we had, I suppose, two key thrusts of what we were trying to do. The first one was you've got to have it to make it work. So how do you actually accelerate 5G and the fiber networks? And I stress again, 5G was a driver, but you also need to have fiber to the premises as well. So how do you drive the connectivity agenda? And we are, and I'll talk about where we are as well, we are the most connected region now because of the work's been done. Absolutely critical, fantastic work done by the team. And I think we've learned an awful lot, because it's not just about, you know, digging up the roads, about putting up masts. It's about working collaboration, but I'll chat in a minute about that. And then it was also, again, about driving at scale. How do you drive at scale the 5G services? And we had a focus around acceleration. That was spring. We talked there about driving it through SMEs predominantly. It was about transport and the new applications that we could do that actually improve, you know, pollution or to reduce that in terms of improvements in the productivity of transport systems, in terms of actually the mapping of it, all those things that go with it. In health, how did we actually take those forward as well? Because that is one of the areas that we've seen as one of the greatest areas of opportunity of new ways of working. Manufacturing, for us, is critically important. 20% of the GDP for the region comes out of manufacturing. And we took those forward. But it was very much not in independent lines. It was also very much about actually how do you actually look at the whole supply chain as well within that one. So, and where can we put links? We've gone to the next slide. First one that I mentioned was the success around our rollout. We are the most connected region. We have now more 5G than anybody else. And that's been achieved. If we go on to the next slide, that's been achieved by working in collaboration across all of the partners in the region. So we've worked closely with local authorities, we've worked closely with the LEPs, we've worked closely with the planning departments. We've mapped out entirely what was needed and where it was needed, and understood what we had at that time to take it forward. It was also a link as well back into many of the operators who fundamentally didn't know how to actually make some of the things happen, because it does get quite complicated, and they wanted to work with people who could make things happen. So for us, it was very much about being that catalyst that helped drive that connectivity agenda forward. And that was by having a team that were experts in what they did. They understood not only the capability of the operators, but also about working closely with local authorities. And how do you make things happen? Because as we all know, it's not easy to actually drive these things. Next one was also looking at the way that we, not only from an installation, but also as well from a planning side, how can you simplify the process? How can you just make it easier to make things happen? And everybody was up for it. It was outstanding. And then what we did then, as we learned and going along, and Tony talked about it, you will make mistakes, but as long as you're all working in partnership on it, you actually just want to make it better. And so we shared best practice. We shared it with government in terms of the barrier busting teams. We shared it with the councils, with the operators and suppliers. And I say this is one of the biggest things that we're now working with the Midlands Engine on, of actually selling these services to actually help other areas become more productive in terms of the rollout of not just 5G, but also fibre to the premise and other technologies as well. So you've got to have it. It's an enabler. You've got to build it before you can take advantage of it. If we go on to the next slide, please. And then what we did then is we actually looked at the accelerators, and we focused very much around the whole green innovation part, the construction and smart cities. So it was very much focused on saying, how can we actually be in a position where we can actually look at housing a number of the different capabilities within a 5G environment? How can actually, again, within the in the construction space, can we actually use new technologies to actually transform existing ways of working? And in the construction space, we actually started to use robotic scanning devices to actually detect imperfections, so that you didn't waste time and money by actually doing things wrong the first time, and you got it right first time. And in smart cities, we focus very much around how can 5G particularly help in the whole area around health and improving areas of social deprivation, so that actually there was a levelling up and an ability for people who were disadvantaged to be able to take advantage of not only health, but also the public transport systems as well. Go on to the next slide. We launched well over 40 5G trials. So we did this at scale, as we were asked to do in the first place. And it was very much about how do we actually take ideas, and with the capability that we built, can we test and learn in some of the areas of greatest need? And we focused around health, manufacturing and transport. In the health one, we did some incredibly innovative things around using 5G in terms of 5G pills that you take for endoscopy, so you didn't have any uncomfortable things. So we looked at new ways of working. And what we've seen very much there is that people, and particularly the whole ecosystem with doctors, they've fundamentally embraced it. And now we're in a position where we're taking care out to people and treating people in a better way in their homes, in the care homes, so that they have a better level of service and we can be more productive in what we do. And that, frankly, it's just really exciting. And I think, you know, I was on the Strategic Health Authority a number of years back for the West Midlands, and there was a reticence to adopt the new technologies. That has now changed and the planets are lining up. So I'm now seeing the whole healthcare sector wanting to do things in a different way to offer a better level of care. And with the backlog we've got, it's critical we do. For manufacturing, there hasn't been enough investment in the past. And so working with the likes of aerospace, we're now in a position, and with MTC, one of the big influencers across the industry, we're now driving the adoption and knowledge we've learned out of the likes of Aerospace and Bosch and others to other SMEs, often through Spring and the Accelerator Programme, so they can actually understand how they can adopt this and take it forward, because it's another world. How can you know what you're going to do unless you've actually seen this working in practice? And again, I've just mentioned it briefly on, in transport, some amazing work done there by the team, so that we've actually been in a position where we've got the first digital trams going across the region. We're actually using it, so we're running it in a timely manner that is actually using the technologies. We're doing it so we're mapping the roads as we're going along, all trialing and actually taking advantage of that to a position where now we want to commercialize these opportunities. Go on to the next slide. So what are the big insights that come out of this one? Well, I suppose first and foremost is, well, I'll put my word on this one. It is about, you have to recognize and believe that by getting behind the 5G initiatives and the whole connectivity agenda, it is something that is an enabler and going to enable you to be able to do things differently going forward. You can't start to actually adopt some of the robotic opportunities. You can't look at some of the fundamental new ways of working. You can't actually be in a position where you can have a transport system unless you have a connectivity agenda and a connectivity capability across your region. So there has to be belief it's going to make a difference. You've got to actually bring the right partners in, and we've worked with a fantastic range of partners, from DCMS right away all across government, because it's not just about the DCMS, it's working with BAYS and people such as that, right across to some of the industry experts that we work closely with. So bring them in and attract those in. And we found that people actually do want to get involved. They want to trial and test with people who want to learn. And, you know, I think the big one out, it's not the technology. It's about what problem you're solving. What is the insight that you have and what's the problem you're solving? And health was one of the best ones, where during COVID, people couldn't travel. So how do you solve it and treat people? How can you actually look at actually doing things in people's homes? And then it's about agile approach and continue using the agile ways of working. So test and learn, test and learn. Not everything's a success, and that's perfectly okay. So how do you actually move it forward? And from a West Midlands perspective, we test and learned all the way through and got to a point where we were able to move things quickly when we found that the results weren't right, to get to a point where we were actually driving the right plan and the right results that we knew needed to be delivered as well. And finally, the partnership approach. It is about a partnership. It's not about the technology, and it's making sure that the whole supply chain works. My last point is we've got to share these things. We're sharing it now, and it's about telling and helping people understand what the benefits are. It's also as well about working across the partnership that you actually create, and being prepared to actually change things and take some levels of risk, which again is always hard to take forward. From West Midlands 5G perspective, you know, we continue to be committed, the combined authority committed to what we've done, and they've been highly supportive from the mayor all the way through and across all the local authorities. And we now are in a position where we want to take those learnings out to a wider group of people. We're working closely with the Midlands Engine. We're working with a number of other regions as well, because it's now, the big message has got to be, how do we actually drive adoption and help other people across the different regions to take full advantage of this 200 million was invested. And we're very happy to come along and talk to any of you and take those things forward. So I'll hand over back to Vicky. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much, Mark. Really insightful overview of the work that you guys have been doing. Thank you. So we are going to jump straight into our second case study for today, which is moving from dense urban area to a far more rural location. So I'd like to introduce you all to Tim Robertson from 5G Rural Dorset. Tim.
Thank you very much indeed. Laura, can you stick your thumb up if you can hear me?
We can hear you.
Wonderful. So good morning, my name's Tim Robertson. I'm a project manager from Dorset Council, and for the last 2 years I've been employed as one of the work package leads for 5G Rural Dorset. Prior to that I had 20 years in the Royal National Lifeboat Institution across many of their different activities, ending up in life-saving innovation, which is how I came to be interested in coastal connectivity, which you'll see is one of the work packages here. Next slide, please. So I think Tony did a good job of talking about why 5G Rural Dorset is here as part of the Testbed and Trials Programme. And yes, we're looking to improve next generation connectivity across Dorset, or look for the opportunities to do it. And we've had to be very clear about that, and I'll mention it in one of my lessons learned around how we market what it is we've been doing to our community. Next slide, please. Tony showed you a map of the UK. There was a green dot on the south coast. If any of you don't know where Dorset is, we're squeezed between Hampshire and Devon on the south coast of England. And these arrows show you the locations of the various work packages that we've been involved with. And I was going to run through each of those and at a very high level just now. So next slide, please. What have we been doing? Next slide. The future of food. So this is our agriculture and aquaculture work package led by Wessex Internet, a very agriculture-based connectivity provider within Dorset. Some of the work that they've done listed here, I'll pick out the highlights. I think the robots has been talked about a lot with autonomous robots in farming. We were looking at per plant farming effectively, and whether we can have autonomous robots downloading information over 5G in an agricultural setting. So private 5G networks laid across the farm to enable real-time high definition video with AI. At a much simpler level, they have deployed sensors across the farm to try and collect massive amounts of data to enable the creation of digital twins of farms. So the farmer has real-time live data and a digital twin to inform their decision making, give them more time to actually do the farm decision making. When we've had some pushback from farmers saying, "Oh, you're trying to take us out of the equation," and that's very much not the focus of this work package. It's trying to free up farmers' time to make farming decisions rather than spend their time trudging around the farm finding if gates are locked and whether they're waterlogged. So sensors doing those things, creating a digital twin to enable those kind of decisions. Aquaculture down in Portland Harbour. Wessex have been supporting some work by Jet Engineering for a 5G enabled aquaculture where they will have monitors in the water, and we're just about to launch, happily didn't launch just before Storm Eunice, but we will be launching a 5G enabled underwater camera to monitor biofouling of seaweed farms. Next slide, please. The Innovation Accelerator, this is a work package that I've been leading at Dorset Innovation Park. We have two networks, an indoor network led by Vodafone, which is located at the MOD's Battle Lab facility. This is an innovation centre, encouraging small companies who otherwise may not have been able to access the MOD, as would prime contractors, inviting them into a space where they can understand the MOD's challenges and rapidly prototype solutions using the latest connectivity. The other network that we've had, also based at the Innovation Park, is an outdoor test range, which is made available to national policing, security and defence organisations. It's a secure but in the wild environment that enables these people to explore the strengths and weaknesses of 5G. Next slide, please. Connected Coast. So this is a work package led by Accelerator, and it was actually proposed when I was working at the RNLI as part of the consultation process that Dorset went through for 5G Rural Dorset, which I'll talk about a bit later on in my lessons learned. But I was engaged by Dorset Council when working for the RNLI to talk about the challenges that the RNLI were facing, and I spent some time talking around the issues of connectivity at the coast, both for search and, sorry about my cuckoo clock, that'll stop in a minute.
I was going to say, it's a strange cuckoo sound.
That is fantastic.
Where was I? Right, connected coast, yes. The RNLI was very clear to look at the challenges both for users of the coast in terms of accessing information whilst they're at the coast, and also search and rescue organisations and the challenges for communication around the coast. This led to the adoption of Connected Coast as one of the work packages led by Accelerate, and we have deployed connected signage down the coast along the Jurassic coast, which provides safety information, water condition information, marketing for local businesses, as well as the first 5G connected buoy, which was in Lulworth Cove, which gave sea state and water temperature information to those buoys and also to local search and rescue organisations. And footfall triggers. I don't know how many of you saw on the news the end of the first lockdown Lulworth and Girdledore completely overrun by visitors, and they were having to shut car parks and deal with the police and the council to try and reduce overcrowding. Well, what we're now doing is using 5G technology to connect up these signs that enables us to count the number of mobile phones in the area, and we're correlating that to the number of visitors and automating those alerts when overcrowding begins to become a concern for the landowner. Next slide, please. The Rural Community Accelerator, this is a work package led by Vodafone. And they were looking to fill in gaps in mobile coverage in what is a highly protected environment. They were putting up 2 masts in 2 locations, one which has been done very successfully near Swanage in a place called Worth Matravers, part of the UNESCO Heritage Coastline. They also tried to put a mast into an MOD range to provide coverage around East Lulworth. I'll talk about that in the lessons learned. Use cases include fixed wireless access for poorly served communities and NB-IoT for social care, which Mark was talking about, and work that they've been doing as well. We've done some work with our tech-enabled care team to support people living in their own homes, and NB-IoT has been a revelation there, I think, and has considerably altered the way that our tech-enabled care will be lived in the future. Next slide. Coastal cliff monitoring. This is led by Bournemouth University in partnership with the British Geological Survey. We are using Vodafone's device on chip devices to monitor conditions and location of various parts of the Jurassic Coast, which is very unstable, to determine if, rather than sending people down there with highly accurate GPSs, we can cover this area with NB-IoT devices in order to monitor the conditions and monitor the land movements, which may in the future enable BGS to develop some confidence in their ability to predict landslides and therefore improve coastal safety. Next slide, please. Why Rural Dorset? Why has Dorset Council got involved in this? Next slide, please. Dorset has not a single mile of motorway. We have both transport and connectivity challenges, which have a negative economic impact on Dorset's economy. Healthcare, we face a substantial challenge. I think more than 50% of Dorset Council's budget is spent on social care. We have the oldest population in the country. I think our demographics are representative of where the rest of the country is likely to be in 30 years' time. So we are a really useful test bed for the challenges we face in care in the future. I've mentioned the Jurassic Coast. We are very reliant on tourism, but we also have to take care of those people who visit our coast, and we have a very unstable coast which can represent some risks to visitors. For network providers, the Jurassic Coast is a difficult place to operate. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site, one of the world's UK's most protected landscapes. So we were really interested on how we can both protect those landscapes whilst also enhancing mobile network coverage to both those who live here, those who work here, and those who visit Dorset as well. Next slide, please. We wish to contribute to the understanding of how we can use 5G to address very specific challenges. I've mentioned public safety, economic challenges we face, agricultural food production, and maintaining our beautiful environment across Dorset. We're really interested in speeding up UK's ability to serve the populations of Dorset. We are poorly served by existing mobile networks. And obviously we want to create opportunities in Dorset as a rural community to maintain skilled, well-paid jobs in this area. Next slide, please. How have we done it? Next slide. Well, I think as everybody before us has mentioned, working with partners has been key. Dorset doesn't know how to do this on their own, and we've surrounded ourselves with people who know how to do this. You can see some of the key players listed here. Beyond that, next slide. We've also been supported by others who aren't financially contributing to the programme, but have gladly helped us with their knowledge and expertise and supported us in the work that we are doing. Next slide, please. How have we gone about doing it? Well, we've been very keen to use existing infrastructure, reusing masts, fibre and buildings wherever possible in order to reduce the impact on the environment. I mentioned at the beginning that I was first engaged with 5G Rural Dorset when I was working at the RMLI, because 5G Rural Dorset spent a lot of time engaging with the community to understand real challenges that can be addressed. So we didn't go out with a solution looking for a problem. We started with the problems and looked at how we could provide solutions to those real world problems. And we've been very keen to understand business models behind these to provide ways of enhancing connectivity to real rural communities that will be commercially viable. And I think NB-IoT for our tech-enabled care team has been a really good example of that. Next slide. Look at the key learnings. I've mentioned community engagement and how important it was to engage those communities and ensure that they're pulling a solution. We need people to need what we are offering rather than popping up and trying to push technology onto them. Partnerships with business, government and academia have been absolutely key, because Dorset didn't know how to do this, didn't have the first idea, and we've wrapped ourselves in people who do know how to do this. We've needed to understand partner motivations and to enable those partners to play to their strengths. There is no point in trying to persuade large multinational mobile network operators to do something they do not wish to do. So we need to understand very clearly what it is that all our partners want to bring to the party, and then play to those strengths and let them do that, and use ourselves largely as the council to fill in those gaps and create a rounded approach. Planning for infrastructure and protected landscapes such as the UNESCO coastline. It is possible. We have enabled the building of infrastructure within those highly protected environments, but our experience does show that it relies on all the partners having a shared goal and positively driving everything towards that solution. We found our planning department, because we were Dorset Council leading, we could engage really closely with our planning teams, and we had a planning officer dedicated to us who was looking for ways to do something rather than reasons not to do it. And then we had everybody pushing, so customers, providers, infrastructure builders, all pushing in the same direction. We were able to do things remarkably quickly. As soon as we lost one of those partners, it became incredibly difficult. Contrast between small and large organisations, and I include Dorset Council as the lead partner itself as one of the large organisations here. Large organisations are slow moving and frustrating, but that is because they are very structured in order to be safe and maintain services safely. Smaller organisations, yes, are very agile, very responsive, but it can be risky working with small organisations, and we sometimes needed the large organisations to put the process around things, put the brakes on, slow people down and make sure we did things correctly, safely, and even legally at times. Finally, NB-IoT coverage. I've mentioned it several times. I think it was a surprise even to the mobile network operator themselves how good the NB-IoT coverage is across rural areas. And we've found multiple applications across agriculture and tech-enabled care that otherwise weren't previously making use of NB-IoT, which they are now looking to do. Next slide. There you go. It wasn't believed that I could trundle through those in 15 minutes, and I think I did it on the spot. That's me done.
Brilliant. Helpfully aided by your cuckoo clock. Thank you, Tim. And really interesting, I think, to see some of the kind of common messaging coming out from you and Mark, despite obviously how very different the two locations are, which we'll pick up on in a little bit more detail when we get to our panel session. But now I'd like to welcome Anne Williams. So Anne has been playing a pivotal role in the work that they have been doing around connecting health and social care in Liverpool. Anne, over to you, please.
Hi, and thank you. So can I have my slides, or am I showing them?
I'm controlling your slides. You tell me when you want me to move.
I think you've missed one. First one.
That is your first one.
Oh right, no, there's one with a view of all our partners. So as everybody else has shown, we've got a slide with all of our list of partners on it. It's a view of the city, and then it's just got at the bottom a whole row of lists. But anyway, sorry.
Sorry, Anne.
Have you got it now?
Not to hand, no, but we can distribute it after to everybody.
Yeah. Okay. So my name's Anne Williams, and I'm actually a commissioner and contracts manager in adult social care. And I'm not really from a tech background, but if you like, I'm the person with the problems. And as Tim said about Dorset, half their income is spent on adult social care. That's actually true for the majority of councils. And although the number of older people may be higher, actually in some areas like Liverpool, we've got a higher number of people who are what we have to fund ourselves, whereas the percentage of self-funders in Dorset, if they own more than £23,500 worth of property or whatever, is a lot higher. So with the burden actually falls the local authority in all areas about social care. So it is a key area where we're looking to try and make savings, and that's really what we started at. So as people have said, there's been many decades of trying to get connectivity into people's homes to try and use some of these new technologies. And I've said it many times before, but Liverpool, particularly in health and social care, we had more pilots than the RAF. So we had lots and lots of SME companies coming in with their trials, and we'd do it for 50 people, we'd show it would work, and then we would struggle to get longer term investment in that. So there's lots and lots of issues that we were trying to resolve in that side. And as I said, we found that it was difficult to show it's difficult to show avoidance. So it's difficult to show that by giving somebody a device, you've kept them in and they're not gone into a care home. You need a long time to start showing those trends. And what we were also aware of, and this was before the current situation where people are now putting up their data charges very openly, the increased data charges were meaning that potentially a larger part of the health and social care budget is actually being spent on the cost of the connectivity. So particularly in when the COVID hit, prior to that, our local CCG's phone bill, if you like, for the GPs was £9,000 a month. And then at the height of COVID, that shot up to £60,000 a month. So that £60,000 a month suddenly takes the money from frontline services. And obviously the pandemic also showed the massive digital poverty and digital divide, and that then strengthens the health inequalities, and we've got particularly low life expectancy in Liverpool. But me personally, the reason why I prompted all of this was because I was really concerned when the analogue telephone line services get switched off in 2025 that we're going to have some sort of connectivity. Currently, we've got over 10,000 people in the city who are receiving some kind of telecare, which is tech-enabled care. And the majority of that currently still uses analogue lines, and we don't have the kind of capital to start investing in a whole load of things and then a lot of SIM cards. So we really were looking for other ways of dealing with that. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is just shows where we are. So I had already managed to get, prior to 2018, I'd got some funding from the EU, and we digitalised our domiciliary care services. So we were able to get smartphones for all of the care workers who are going to people's homes to deliver the care, and we had the digital case management system, and that shows the benefits, and the care workers themselves enjoyed working with it, or enjoy it, still in place now. And as I say, I'm trying to not do any more pilots. We want things to work and then be embedded. And then we realised that part of that, I also got some money for LoRaWAN gateways to start looking at some of those new technologies in tech-enabled care. So we then looked to see for a test bed to go. We were successful in the first 5G test bed, and that basically demonstrated that we were able to save about £200,000 per 100 users if we used it for health and social care purposes. So and there's all the details there on the screen. And then we then got for 5G Create, because the original test bed we did, we were just using Wi-Fi through millimeter wave nodes on our lampposts, and we were also using LoRaWAN and Wi-Fi. So it was Wi-Fi and LoRaWAN and what's the third? We had 3 anyway on the first one, but we didn't have any cellular. We weren't using any telephone systems. So on 5G Create, we've now got some cellular on our lampposts and street furniture. Next one, please. Okay, so this is how we've done it and what we're doing. So we've got our own CCT fibre network, which is what we're picking up at the moment, and a lot of urban centres have got these CCT networks. So we're using the dark fibre that's within that network, and then we're taking a pop-up to the top of that, and then we're using millimetre mesh waves and cellular waves across the lampposts in the area. And some of those are going on to buildings, and we're using GP surgeries, health centres, some in the hospitals, and community buildings. So the side of the building that you can see in that picture is a community learning centre. So next slide, please. Okay, and this is just a picture to show you that that's a CCTV camera pole with a small cell, and you can see all of the various types of networks that are on there as well. So that's what we've got at the moment, and we're putting those around the city. So next one, please. Okay, our focus has been on adoption, as other people have said, and what we've come up with as one of our key partners is eHealth Cluster, and we've actually, through them, we worked out an adoptionist readiness level to complement the TRL, because what we found was that quite a lot of people are very keen to come and trial, as West Midlands has said, that so they want to come and trial the equipment. But actually, I'm looking to see, well, is that really a problem, or is that just technology for technology's sake? And so we're really trying to work out what it is. So we ask people now, and I think if anybody's heard me speak before, you'll know that I got really exasperated when companies tried to sell me new toilets to go in our care homes, which would be the unique selling point for it was that there was sort of Japanese style. Everybody knows what Japanese style toilets are, but this unique selling point was it could also tell you as your urine flowed into the pan whether you were pregnant or not. Now, in a care home where the average age is 83, it had a limited market, I felt. But so after sort of that time, I decided I had a bit of a rant to my colleagues, and so we came up with this idea of having an ARL, and we're working collaboratively with West Midlands. Actually, we're working with both West Midlands and Dorset on trying to build this so that somebody who's like myself, who's a commissioner of services in authorities, can actually understand how far this is, not just in the TRL level, but actually whether there really is a problem. Because what we ask them to do, and there's the 5 dimensions there, but we're asking, why are you doing this? What is it? Have you spoken to anybody who's got this problem? Just to establish whether there really is that problem there. Next, please. So these are the challenges that we were addressing. We're working in Kensington, which is the socio-economic opposite to Kensington in London. And when we were in Europe, it was the 4th poorest ward in Europe. And so we have got a lot of households who don't have any access to affordable, reliable connectivity. Interestingly, the area when we went in had no 5G at all, and now all of the big mobile companies, and there's no business case for it, but their Kensington in Liverpool has now got far better 5G than Kensington in South London. So there's a story there somewhere. And this is also the digital divide, as I mentioned before. Particularly, it became very apparent in the COVID lockdown, and I've mentioned we've got really poor health inequalities, and we've had a very slow adoption up to the COVID process. And I've already mentioned the increase in the alarming increase that the NHS have noticed, as well as local authorities and data charges. Next slide. Okay, so we've got a neutral host 5G independent network, and we've got Wi-Fi and LoRaWAN. I think what you need to understand if you're in a local authority who's looking into this, you will need to understand your Ofcom licenses and the spectrum. We're putting pressure on, well, we'd like to lobby Ofcom to try and get more medium powered cells that we can put in on our spectrum license, because that would make a huge difference. You need far less cells on the lamppost to make a big difference. And I think you also need to understand who your anchor institutions are, who your partners are going to be. As I say, we talk about stackable use cases, and you really need to have, if you're doing something for a private network for civic duty, if you like, then you need to include your local NHS. Next slide, please. Okay, so what we need, if you're going as an authority and you're looking at this, you need to know what your street furniture is. You need to know what your CFI status on your lamppost. You need to understand what the lampposts are. Not all lampposts are equal. So you need to be able to make sure you can actually put up some of the equipment on this. Understand what the available fibre is in your area. You're going to need somewhere where you can go get your network here in. You're going to need some kind of partner for that. Most authorities don't have these facilities. We're lucky that one of our partners is Ames, and they've got their centre, and actually it goes direct, so it doesn't have to send signals via Manchester or London. So it's a nanosecond saving of time, which is vital to some of the health use cases that some of our NHS colleagues are wanting to introduce. Everything now we can get software as a service, so it means you can do a lot of remote altering of configuration of cells, etc. I think there's the whole left there. And I think one of the big pluses that we can do is that we can suddenly have an SLA that health service are willing to live with. So for 4 hours, we can make sure that we get there, which is far better than any of the available large MNOs, SLAs that they can offer. Next, please. Okay, our main issue, follow the trailblazers, don't be the first. We've actually got lots of twitches in the eye that can come up. We were the first. We had a lot of anti-5G sentiment. That's not been mentioned up so far, but we did have a lot. At one stage, I had to have a bodyguard when I went to a public consultation. So there are issues there, but we've been there, and as Vicky said, hopefully you can learn from what we've done, and we're very willing to talk about it and share. I think what we've found is that costs are high at the testbed, because obviously there's a lot of R&D cost into that. The industry is developing quickly. The other DCMS 5G, the Frank and the DCIA things that are happening now that can help some of this. I know that we've already have been approached by a number of the big international players who are interested in getting a combined millimetre and cellular node to go onto lampposts. There are no 5G dongles that we can get yet. The 5G MiFi prices are still higher than the 4G, but we're hoping that that policy will come within the year. That makes a big difference to what you can use going forward. Next slide, I think that's the last one. Next slide. And that's Rosemary, who is a partner in crime, and we're in doing this. I'm going to put onto the chat a link to our 5G showcase event that we're putting on in Liverpool on the 9th of March. And if any of the participants today would either like to attend in person, very welcome to come to Liverpool, or virtually. And there's a lot more technical people who will be able to explain some of the technicalities that we've done going forward. So that's me finished. I think I'm on time.
Brilliant. Everyone's been perfectly on time. That's fantastic. Thank you. So thank you everyone for all of those sort of little case studies that we've done. I'm going to invite all of our speakers now to join us for a panel session. This is your opportunity to ask any questions that you have. Please use the chat function. I know some of you have been doing that already, and some of those questions we've been responding back to you directly. But if there are questions that you would like to put to individuals or to the group as a whole, then please do so. So before we start with some of the questions that I would like to bring to the group, I'd like to just welcome Sharon to the proceedings. So as I mentioned at the top of the call, Sharon joins us from Nottinghamshire and the work that they're doing with 5G connected forests. But Sharon, I wonder if you just wanted to take a couple of minutes just to introduce yourself to the group and just give a brief overview of the work that you've been doing.
Of course, thank you so much for having me as well, and it's very nice to be here today listening all these examples from various projects that we share from the same Testbed and Trials project. So I'm leading the 5G Connected Forest project, which is based in Sherwood Forest in Nottingham. We have a few use cases going through. Again, a few first again to try in terms of tourism, visitor experience, using holographic movies of Robin Hood and Ghost Walk, and also using a robot dog called Gizmo to do some environmental management analysis for us in the Sherwood Forest. Yeah, I'm more than happy to share more details on it. But I think the benefit of what I want to share with the attendees today, 5G Connected Forest is a very small PMO team, and I just wanted to share some findings of it is achievable. We can still do it. You can work with a small group of providers, smaller businesses, as long as you can share. It's all been mentioned by Mark very clearly that relationship management is the key, collaboration is the key. As long as you put those key points in place, it is achievable. Just don't give up. Start from the slow project, what is doable. We obviously picked the not a normal forest, it is an ancient forest. It was the most difficult location that I can say that to try 5G first time. But I still remember, I think Paul is still in the attendees here. I still remember my first conversation with Paul Clegg. We have an ambition to do this in Sherwood Forest. Shall we do it? And his sentence was, "Go for it." So I just gone for it, and we done it. We are almost coming to an end with the delivery now. So yeah, happy to answer any questions going forward.
Brilliant, thank you, Sharon. That's a really great overview. Okay, so I'm gonna bring everybody in for a fairly big, meaty question to get things started. So we heard a lot there about kind of lots of pilots, lots of smaller projects, and I very much liked your kind of more pilots than the RAF description there. In terms of the audience that we have here today who might be thinking, okay, that's great, you guys have done all the pilots and projects, what we want to know now is how we actually commercially deploy this stuff. What advice would you give from the work that you've done around how to build the economic case for building networks? And I'm going to open that up to everyone to see who would like to tackle that fairly meaty question first off. I think you're all going to have really interesting views on this.
Happy to have a first stab. As I said, we've found that we're trying to get a green book business case together now for looking at this. I think what I would say is that you don't have to choose your own independent against a commercial. It can be one and the same. So us putting things on the lamppost means that the MNOs can come and use our street furniture as we have a neutral host, and we can slice the spectrum that's available from there. And so there is it's not either or. But the usable stack case, you need to get a whole list of use cases, and then it has to be stackable, so you can then get the benefit across. So whether, like in our city, tourism is important, if we manage to get this across, we're aiming for ubiquitous coverage. And if we get it all across our city, we will genuinely become a smart city. So we will then have all of the cities will then be connected, and then we can introduce the whole range then, as has already Mark has mentioned, but the West Midlands, traffic management, air quality, the whole range of what you can do, footfall, the tourism, the holograms for certain tourist spaces. There's a whole range of things that can then come in. But what we were really particularly trying to do is to not exclude the population that can't access those things because they can't afford their 5G phones. What we want to make sure is that is accessible to everyone. And there's about 6 schools in the Kensington area. I'm working with one of the schools, and they've got 149 children who don't have any access to any connectivity. So those children have got no access whatsoever to any smartphone to work remotely at home. So every time there was a remote education, those kids just didn't get any education at all. Teachers ran around with paper work to do, but honestly, they didn't know that got done.
Just
so
building
there's a real issue there, and we need to make sure that it's available for everybody.
Yeah, and I'm going to say it's Mark here. I'm going to say I think it is. You've got to stand back and say, if you look at it, the whole, as a big elephant, it's not about building a 5G network, as Anna's absolutely right. You've got to go back and say, what are you actually trying to achieve? So the example she just gave you around about, digital poverty, that is about enabling, and you could be using a way of making it attractive for the commercial operators to build in those areas, which they don't, is by actually using public assets. So how can you actually do that so they're not doing, paying rents and stuff like that? There are ways that, the whole GigaHub initiative, although it doesn't play into urban areas, is something that could be done. So there's government assistance in some of these areas as well, and getting behind that. But when some of the applications we're looking at, we've been doing work with hospitals about putting private networks into the hospitals because coverage in hospitals is so crap. And how can you actually do that? And it's looking at the business case because they've got so much Wi-Fi that just interferes with each other and is wrong. So how could you use some of the other technologies to deliver? And it's not about technology, it's about the right level of service to do that. So you build it up depending on what the business is you're doing. So, you just got to take them all in. Are they generic? In which case it's harder. If they're specific, it's easier. The manufacturing one is a great one because you'd have a private network, possibly, might not be the only solution. I see Dean came on because it's not about 5G, it's about the right technology in the right place. And in that one, it is, many of the small SMEs can't afford to actually spend the money on CapEx. So do you put a whole leasing model in place where they just pay for a monthly service? And you drive the value in management report. So there's lots of solutions to it. And again, we're commercializing this, so we're very happy to come along and take those learnings and chat to people about it. But it's sitting down and saying, what's your problem and what are you trying to sort? And then you build it from there. And there's lots of people to help to actually make these things happen. That's the interesting thing about it. And we're now at the cusp of actually driving it. And our responsibility across all of us is to actually make sure we drive that adoption for the benefit of the UK economy.
Thank you, Mark. And Tony, I'm going to play you in here because you obviously have a unique perspective across the whole programme.
Thanks, Vicky. I'm just going to endorse, I suppose, firstly, what Anne and Mark both said, in that you're not alone in this. There's a lot of information now available on what people have done right, what people have done wrong, and which they hadn't done, which they hadn't tried to do. That's available and through the UK 5G website in particular. There's a ton of information there. There's also a lot of people, and the supply chain, the supplier register on the UK 5G website is again a really good resource for finding people to help you in making your progress in this way. But I think in terms of how do you move on from how do you cure pilotitis and move into real deployments, I think is something which dogs every kind of generation of technology like this is how does it get into mainstream. And I think it needs a combination of things. It needs stories that inspire people to get on and say, you know, really like the way that worked, I want more of that. So whether it's the kind of cultural experience that Karen talked about in the forest, whether it's public safety on the Jurassic Cliffs of Dorset, or whether it's inner city Birmingham or inner city Liverpool. You know, you've got such a huge range of different types of problems people are trying to solve. But one of the phrases that's been bandied around a lot around DCMS is that a use case doesn't make a business case. So you need this concept of stackable business cases that add up to making enough of an economic impact that they justify the cost. I'd also again endorse some of the stuff that's been going on in the chat. Dean's right. There isn't one technology that will solve all the problems that an area faces. So you do need to link these things together. It is a hybrid of different solutions that have to add up to the solution you need. You absolutely have to have good fibre because the mobile stuff doesn't work without it, or it only works to a limited extent. You have to have an understanding of where it's cost effective to put in a private network or a cellular network, as opposed to one of the other lower cost options. But I come back to Mark's point. First thing to do is work out what it is you want to achieve. What's the problem or what are the problems you're trying to solve? And then start building up from the ground level or even underground with how you're going to build the infrastructure, what assets you've got as a place to put on the table to attract people to start working with you. Follow the great practices that's been established by the barrier busters from DCMS and increasingly by the DCIA work and that the leadership shown by West Midlands in their infrastructure accelerator work, all in the same vein of how do you prepare yourself to be a great place to invest in the mobile technology. And I think that's, so you in other words, you've got both ends of this. The first bit is how do I make myself attractive to invest in, and the other end is what am I going to do with it when I've got it, so that there's a business case that falls out of that.
Yeah, okay.
Brilliant, thank you, Tony. And Mark and Tim, you both mentioned in your case studies around kind of incubators and accelerators and how you've worked with those. And so again, I wanted to open this up, I think specifically to you two first, but to the group more broadly, about how you see from your experiences you can use not just 5G, but other types of advanced connectivity to stimulate regional business growth. Tim, maybe I'll come to you first on that.
Yeah.
My experience would be primarily at the Dorset Innovation Park. So this is an enterprise zone that's been relatively quiet until the advent of the 5G project. And actually the 5G project has been a catalyst for attracting high-tech users to the park who otherwise wouldn't have come down there, defence and security partners, to the extent now that I think the Dorset Innovation Park is suddenly having to change its marketing from being, we've got loads of space, we welcome loads of people, to, well, actually, we're suddenly finding ourselves somewhat busy down here, which I think has come to us as a surprise to my colleagues in Dorset Council who have been marketing it to this point. And I see both the technology itself and actually the momentum around the 5G project on the Dorset Innovation Park has been enough to stimulate interest and draw people down. But obviously, there's been a very happy circumstance with the Battle Lab being developed by the LEP and the MOD on the site at the same time. And I think the two of those together, the development of the facility for collaboration with the military and the provision of the enhanced connectivity both indoors and outdoors has provided a very attractive site for people to move down. So for us in Dorset Council, we've achieved one of our major aims of our involvement in Dorset Council of attracting businesses to the county through the work we've done with 5G on the innovation park.
Yeah. And from us, I agree with Tim. What Tim saying is about the end. It's about driving. For me, it's part of the driving job. So we got the Accelerator Programme through Spring, and we've now helped over 500 companies, and we've got more to do as well over the next year as well. And it's about making people aware of the opportunities, because I know I used this example before, but it's the analysis when you're talking about the mobile world or the technology world and many of the manufacturing or health, the adage, I don't know if I can say it these days, but I'll say women are from Venus and men are from Mars. They're different languages. They don't understand. Why would they understand some of the capabilities if they've not been brought into that world? So for us, it's about, as Tony was just saying, having great stories, because people buy stories and can start to appreciate how they could actually use it in their businesses, in the environment. We're seeing with NHS Digital and NHSX about they're trying to drive that technology and new ways of working, but you need examples and you need exemplars of people who are doing it. So we've worked closely with, not just in the West Midlands, with AE Aerospace, we've worked with Bosch on the manufacturing side, we're working with the NHS and doing work, and it's taking those out because they can be quite insular. And I was determined, I just didn't want to be in a position where you do a trial and it just dies and it's an academic piece of work. This is about driving the adoption through the UK economy. And hence the reason we're commercializing what was started and taking it forward so that people see the value of it. And we will succeed or fail because people think we add value about helping them actually drive what is important. Because ultimately it will come down to these accelerators. It's great, but then how do people make money or do social good? Because it depends on what their KPIs are to actually mean that they go, yeah, it's really good. And one, they'll either pay for it, or two, they actually will adopt it. So accelerators are critical, but there can be a cash pit where you just plow money into it and you don't get anything out of it. And do you know what? Sometimes that might be right, as long as you get the business coming out of it. Might be the way of looking at the cost of doing business.
Mm-hmm. Brilliant, thanks, Mark. And Sharon, I'd like to get your thoughts in on this as well, actually, from sort of a Nottinghamshire perspective and what you're doing and how you think about this.
Thank you. And we have an innovation center in Nottinghamshire, north of Nottinghamshire as well, and we experience the same thing, how we can let them know about the opportunity, because we undertook a business survey with 5G, and the main outcome was not many people know about the capabilities of 5G and how they can interpret it into their business. So what we did, not only bringing those businesses together who are interested, who are innovative, which is I can easily say many businesses are really interested in these innovative solutions to increase their productivity. Not only we bring them together in our innovation center to make them try 5G, use as a feasibility experience or feasibility study, but also we developed the first 5G career program to work with the schools and universities to extend that knowledge and skills. So because it doesn't matter that you need to be in the digital sector, 5G can change any career. We always give the same example. Even a hairdresser might need a 5G to use an AR solution, a holographic solution if he wants to develop that into their business growth. So this is what we are trying to extend and link it with the digital inclusion as well. So bringing those skills into place.
Mm-hmm. Brilliant, thank you, Sharon. Something else that I really noticed across each of the presentations that you talked to varying degrees around creating the pool, the importance of engaging with communities, and you obviously, I think, as one of the trailblazers from the very first set of 5G projects, experienced perhaps a more extreme version of this than some of the other people on the calls. I wondered what kind of advice you could potentially give to the audience here today about how to effectively engage with communities, to bring them on that journey with you, and to kind of proactively manage any concerns or questions that people may have.
I think what we found was that we as soon as we were starting to give out devices, because the way that we've actually worked is we haven't given people access to our network as such. What we've done is, if they've been assessed as needing a device or some kind of care, then we have used a digital device. So we've been able to go into somebody's home and say to them, this is how it works, and this is what will happen. And we have told them that it's part of 5G, but they've just been so grateful to get the new devices that they haven't really been bothered. What we have found is that people who live outside of the area are the ones who've done the anti-5G. And when we got to the stage where we'd actually assisted over 300 people, the community started to fight back and and sort of say, well, actually, you've got a 4G or a smartphone in your back pocket, and you're telling me I can't have it. And so we have won over the community by showing the benefits, but it has been quite a long time, and I wouldn't say we've won over all of the community. We've had lampposts, the lampposts are at street level, as we saw in the photograph. So the devices are relatively low level in some instances. We had one stolen quite early on that we've had, and then we've had one that was shot at with a firearm. Police can't decide whether it was shooting practice or as a result of an incident. And one lamppost was knocked over, and obviously we needed our integrated mesh system to pick that up quite quickly. So we have got some sort of real life experience about that, but the actual involving the community, I think it's not about the 5G. It's the fact that they can then join the digital, tackling the digital divide. That's the way that we've gone about it. And I think we did have some fire. One activist burned a Robertson 4G mast down in Liverpool, thinking it was 5G, and actually got over 3 years in prison. So when that was announced, and that the length of sentence that he got, we found then that a lot of the activism was not quite as violent. But there is a lot of concern, and I think that some issues. I do think that some of the large MNOs who are putting in planning permission applications for very large masts in an urban area, that then have quite a few cabinets around it for cooling or whatever, in a very small street, that actually is very overpowering. And I think that there is a need for industry to actually understand as well what that the objections not necessarily on the misinformation about 5G sending out COVID or any of the other false science that's been circulated. Actually, people don't like great big things in their street where they don't like the aesthetics of it. Yeah, I think we need to work together to make sure that we get that better.
Yeah, sorry, go on.
I would back that up, and from a rural perspective as well, we spent a very great deal of time at the beginning of the programme worrying about anti-5G sentiment and preparing ourselves for it coming in, and we found actually very little has come in on an anti-5G basis. And the major problem that we have had has been an aesthetic one, where a has been unsympathetically placed right in front of somebody's lovely chocolate box cottage, and we've dealt with that very quickly by moving it somewhere else because it didn't need to have been put there. But actually, it was the aesthetic side rather than 5G concerns was reflected in rural communities as well.
Yeah. Thank you. For anybody who has any particular kind of concerns or is dealing with issues regarding kind of questions from the public and they're not quite sure how to respond to those, we do have a dedicated 5G safety page on the UK 5G website, which has got a range of tools developed specifically for local authorities to help you kind of proactively answer the questions that people might have. Now, we are nearly at the top of the hour, and there's a final question that I would like to come to everybody in turn to get their thoughts on, which is really for the audience that we have here, what is the one key thing that you would want other place leaders and makers to know based on your experiences with 5G? And I'm going to take you in the order I can see you on my screen, which is Mark, you first, please. I think you're on mute.
You'd think, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Age, put it down to age. I think the learning I would have is talk to people who've done it, and don't go out alone. Talk to people who know it. Tony said it. There's a lot of knowledge out there. We're all here to help, and but get behind it, because it does change people's lives, and it's about what it does for people in the communities and businesses. That's what it's all about, and in new ways of working. But again, bit of heresy. It's not just about 5G. It's about the right connectivity in the right place.
Yeah, perfect. Tony?
Don't wait for 6G.
Yes.
I say that as a slightly tongue-in-cheek, but yeah, obviously there's a conservatism in a lot of organisations where people are reluctant to take on kind of change and adopt new things kind of fairly early in their lives. So I think you have to kind of, in a sense, you have to judge your own appetite, your own capability to handle, you know, some of the challenges that a new thing like 5G is going to bring. So definitely get help. Definitely make sure, do a little skills audit before you start. Bring in some experience from outside to help you to build that case. Make sure you've got a solid economic case, and listen to the stories. Make sure you've got your inspiration as well as your capability. And between those two things, and all of the practical stuff that is now accessible. You dip your toe in the water, try it, but do it with the right spirit of adventure as well as practicality.
Brilliant, thank you. Very well articulated, Tony. Sharon, I'm coming to you for a 1-minute answer, please.
Yes, very quickly. It's a very difficult journey, but don't give up. If you have the concept in mind, just follow it. And as it said before, there is not one solution fit for all. You can create your own solution and way to achieve that. So just follow your instinct.
Brilliant, thank you. And Anne?
I think that we've learned that you don't have to be passive in the development of communications, so that we've been very proactive. So, waiting until the mobile phone operators see a business case to bring 5G to Liverpool, quite low down in their list. We were quite down low in a list of cities, but by being so proactive, suddenly we've got very good coverage. So I think it is that you can be proactive, and as I say, you can work with people and work with the big guys. Our MNO is the 5th MNO, which isn't really widely known, but we're working with Tele Research, so they can make our own SIM cards. We can bring the whole range to it. So there is a whole range of different size companies that you can work with.
Brilliant, thank you, Anne. And last but not least, Tim.
Tony stole my thunder straight away by saying around the local authorities themselves being risk averse, and we've benefited from having the support and the top cover from our line management within Dorset Council, who want this to happen and have allowed us to modify processes, avoid delays that otherwise be in place, and they've ridden top cover and said they'll tidy up after us if needs be, because they trust us to make stuff happen. So they've cut us a bit of slack, so that's key. Beyond that, I would say spectrum licensing is complex, it's error prone, and it is slow, and you will need help to navigate that. So we have relied very heavily on third parties who understand Ofcom and the spectrum licensing world and have helped us navigate through it.
Brilliant, thank you. Great range of kind of advice and support there, thank you. We are nearly out of time, so I want to say a big thank you to all of our speakers and presenters this morning for sharing their kind of thoughts and experiences. And I also wanted to let you know that, as I mentioned at the top, this is the first in a series of events. The next one is looking at diving into some of the more technical elements. What does neutral host mean? What are private networks? What do you need to know about them? So that one's taking place next Tuesday. On the 8th, we've got a session talking specifically around how places can attract inward investment. And on the 15th, we've talked a lot today about partnering, and we'll be exploring the key to success for partnerships between public and private sector. The links to those are all on the UK 5G site, and we will be sharing by email afterwards a post-event survey. I think the link for that has also gone in the chat. Please do take the time to fill that in. We'd love to know how these events are helpful, if they are, if they're not, what we can do to make them even more so. And also what other events and what other topics you'd like us to explore. There'll also be links in there to each of those 3 events. So that wraps us up for this morning. Thank you so much for your time and attention. Thank you very much to all of our speakers. If anybody would like to be introduced directly, some of the speakers have shared their contact details already, but there is a general sense of everyone being very willing to help you on your journeys. So please do get in touch with us if you would like introductions. You can reach us at marketing@uk5g.org. Thank you very much for your attention, everybody, and have a wonderful day. Thank you. Goodbye.